We can safely assume that a natural athlete cannot have limitless muscle mass. There's a cap. And over the years, I've kind of listened to people talk about this. Some people say it's 20 kilos of lean muscle mass. That's kind of the max a natural bodybuilder, if you will, can put on. Some days I think that's even too much. I think it's even less than that. There's small variations in that, obviously. It depends on the genes. It depends on all sorts of things. Some people have kind of used, wrist widths, measurements of hip width, waist width to kind of work out what's possible. But it doesn't really matter if it's 15 or 25 or 20 or whatever the case might be. There's a limit, right? And so when we're thinking about strength training, thinking about my goal of getting to 300 kilos squat, I can't just continue to just think, okay, I just need to put on more muscle to, squat 10 kilos extra, because there's a limit to that. And I've kind of known this over the years, and this is why I've kind of led myself to training more for like technical proficiency, technical mastery, because I feel like if I can optimize my levers, my God-given levers and my proportions, that's kind of where the most gains are going to be. I need to maximize my neural efficiency, if you will, to perfection, maximize my technique to kind of get stronger that way. Because I know I can't just put on another 10 kilos into my legs to squat. I can't look like Tom Platz, basically. It's impossible to have quads like that. So I need to rely on other means to move this weight. Thinking about all of that, I just keep thinking to myself, okay, so I have the muscle that I have, but when I squat and when I deadlift, I know for a fact that I'm leaking power in my system. Meaning that when I'm kind of squatting the bar and my legs are pushing, part of that vertical force that I'm putting into the bar is kind of leaking to the sides. And when we think about leaking forces, it's not, the majority of the leaking is going to be in joints. So, if you think about the femur, if you think about, how stacked that is, it's just a muscle on a long bone. There's not a lot of, leaking of power that's going to happen there. However, if you think about your spine and how many different joints your, say, lumbar spine has, or in fact, the entire spine, that's a lot. And so there's a lot of potential for power to leak through and not into the bar. The reason why I said the lumbar spine first is because, the lumbar is kind of the most vulnerable portion of our spine. The thoracic spine has the ribs, and so there's more kind of rigidity there in that structure. We've got lats coming off, which are massive muscle groups. We've got the scapula as well. It's like another bit of, solid tissue there. So it's kind of different in the thoracic spine. The lumbar spine, however, it's kind of like it's on its own. I mean, there's muscle around there, but the muscles, the structures around that are not beef. It's not just slabs of muscle. And so last few days I've been thinking about core, and I've been thinking about if I could kind of maximize my core tightness, my core strength, and limit the amount of power that I'm leaking through that kind of lumbar region. That's probably something that I need to address. Because if I know on one hand that I can't just keep putting on muscle mass, then I need to look at other avenues and kind of limit the power that I do have, limit it from leaking out. And I know for a fact that the lumbar spine is where most power is leaked. So there's no doubt about that, squatting and deadlifting trains your core. It's impossible to say that somebody that has a 300 kilo squat has a weak core. However, if we're thinking about, completely reducing that leak of power, then I think it's in our best interest to directly train the core. I've made videos in the past where I've kind of, given, periods of certain exercises. Like I've done suitcase carries, I've done farmer's carries, I've done sit-ups, I've done crunches, I've done leg raises, I've done all these sort of things in different blocks in the attempt to kind of like solidify my core. Yesterday and today, I decided to go back to sit-ups. The thinking behind that was squats and deadlifts are basically hip extension and knee extension, right? I'm not doing anything that kind of uses hip flexion. So sit-ups is basically hip flexion. Now, sit-ups have kind of gotten a lot of bad rep over the years because, it could potentially hurt your lower back. It hurts your lower back because the number one muscle that we're using to sit up is the iliopsoas. The iliopsoas originates from like your lumbar spine, essentially, maybe T12, some people, and goes down and inserts into the femur. So when that thing contracts, your lower body and your upper body kind of meet, or you flex your hip. Potentially, if you do too much volume or you do improper form, you can potentially hurt your lower back because that psoas muscle originates from the lumbar spine. So I think the potential is there for injury. However, I still think it's a fundamental human movement. We are flexing of the hip. We are not doing some sort of weird twist motion. It's just hip flexion. It's exactly like the squat is just the other direction. We are not extending the hip, we are flexing the hip. So I think there's value there. And I think I'm going to give sit-ups a go. So yesterday and today I did sit-ups yesterday, I did sit-ups today. And I can tell you that doing sit-ups before doing squats does something to you, man. Basically, it makes you aware of your midsection. And so when you are squatting the bar, and if you are kind of too much anteriorly tilting, you will feel that because you have a mind-muscle connection with your, six-pack muscle. And so having that mind-muscle connection because of the pump, you will feel if you start shifting too much into a pelvic tilt. If you start shifting too much, then it basically means that you are letting go of your core and you are leaking power. So I think it's beneficial to get a mind-muscle connection with your core prior to doing squats and deadlifts, purely because it gives you a reference point. It gives you basically a sensory input, what's happening with your abs. I think there's value there. Obviously, you're going to get stronger if you can continue to train your core directly on top of doing the compound lifts. I think you'll get better, in terms of strength. But I think it's also very beneficial to do them before the compound movements, purely, like I said, because you're kind of aware where you are in space. So this is what I've been thinking. I've been sick, obviously, for a week and a half now. But I've been doing some research. I've been doing some thinking about this, and I think we all need to do some more direct work of the core on top of the compound lifting. That's what I'm thinking at the moment. So let's see how it goes. I think there are many different core exercises out there. Some people talk about Pallof presses. There's all sorts of plank variations. I've mentioned suitcase carries are really good as well. But none of these exercises kind of give me the same, feedback that a concentric, eccentric type of exercise does, like sit-ups. So anyway, like I said to you, the sit-ups are basically a psoas exercise, but I do have a bit of DOMS in my six-pack muscle. So it's the prime mover is the psoas, but if you didn't have your six-pack muscle contracting, then what you would have is basically complete lordosis of your spine as you are lifting your torso or your legs, depending if you're doing leg raises or just sit-ups. So your six-pack muscle needs to contract to counter that lordotic posture that your psoas would kind of cause if your six-pack muscle wasn't turned on. So I think the psoas works, the iliacus works. I think rectus abdominis works. I think the sit-ups is an excellent exercise. So anyway, guys, as you always, I'm gonna give this a good go. Let's see how it translates to my squat. I think it's gonna be good, but like always, I'm gonna give it a good go and see how my body responds. All right, guys. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.